Fantastic. Well, let's get started, shall we? Well, hi everyone and welcome. Thanks so much for joining today. It's great to see so many of you here. We're going to be talking about empowering working parents in the remote workplace today. We expect the webinar to last no more than an hour, and we'll send through a recording afterwards. Also, please do look out for the feedback form we'll be sending through. It'd be great to get your thoughts on how we can improve the webinar series and make sure to keep covering topics that are of the highest level of interest. Delighted to be joined by three fantastic panelists today. First off, we've got Sarah, who's a mother of three, TEDx speaker, author and CCO at Bubble, an app connecting parents to babysitters and nannies that their friends already know, use and trust. Sarah's passionate about the importance of flexible childcare and how to enable and empower working parents to feel fulfilled and happy both in and outside the workplace. We've then got Jess, who's a mother of three, award-winning entrepreneur and CEO of That Works For Me, a marketplace that connects businesses with experienced professionals, often mums looking for flexible and remote work. It's their mission to stop hard-earned skills going to waste. And finally, Ben is a father of one and recruitment director at Instant Impact, where he's been juggling being a parent, managing a team, leading client relationships, and driving business improvements without regular childcare assistance and with a partner who also works full-time. So thanks to all of you guys for joining us this afternoon. Want it to be a really interactive session today, so I'm going to give a very brief overview and scene set before chairing a Q&A. I have got some questions prepared for our panel, but it'd be far more engaging to have your questions. So if you could please pop them into the Q&A box at the bottom as we go, that'd be fantastic. Quick background on me and on my business, Instant Impact. So I'm a recent first-time father. My baby boy, Billy, was born on the 29th of December last year. I'm also founder and co-CEO of Instant Impact. We're in-house recruitment experts, so we work as an extension of our clients' HR function to provide the team, expertise, marketing and technology that they need to make high-quality diverse hires directly. We also work with all of our clients to help them cope with global trends, be that remote working, improving diversity, and everything in between. And we've run webinars on all of those topics and will continue to do so. So to set the scene for the topic today, we're undergoing a time of change that is truly unprecedented in most of our lifetimes. And it's been HR people and talent teams that have been in the driving seat. We've had to marshal our companies through so much over the last year, whether that's rewriting the rulebook for COVID and lockdown or responding to the global momentum behind diversity initiatives that followed the Black Lives Matter protests earlier this year. You could say that we've been forced to re-examine the way that we look at talent across the board. We prefer to say that we've been given the opportunity to create a better working world. COVID has shone a light on how difficult it can be to be a working parent as part of that. Those of us with kids at home have had to juggle breakfasts, lunches, dinners, homeschooling, illnesses, entertaining and caring, all with our day jobs at the same time. As I said right at the top, I'm only 7 weeks in and I'm pretty knackered. One of the benefits that comes out of all of this, though, is that lockdown has forced many decision makers to acknowledge just how hard the role of the working parent is, even if it's just because of their own personal experience. And hopefully the concessions that we've put in place to cope with lockdown will stick with us throughout 2021 and beyond. Companies that are able to develop a culture of flexible remote working are going to have a clear advantage, in our opinion. Almost 30% of mothers with a child under the age of 14 said they'd reduce their working hours due to childcare reasons, according to a 2019 ONS survey. If you can get this right, you'll have access to a pool of talent that lots of companies overlook. And what's more, attracting, recruiting and retaining candidates from different backgrounds will become much easier. With working parents, gender diversity is the immediately obvious benefit. But remember that the same flexibility that will help attract and retain working parents will also help us to improve other key areas of diversity too. People with physical and neuro disabilities might appreciate not having to commute in every day or work from a busy office. Workers from a rural or more remote areas of the country, which are often socioeconomically deprived, might also value the ability to work from home. I think a little bit of flexibility can go an awfully long way, and we're expecting it to continue to be one of the top factors in companies' employer value propositions. It can also help with growth. Having a flexible workforce could be a real weapon when it comes to scaling the team and winning new projects. You can build a team that's more robust to changes in your workload and can fit the new business coming through your pipeline. So without further ado, I think it's time for our panel to explore the 2 key time periods that are pertinent to empowering working parents in the remote workplace. We'll spend the first half of the session today exploring what we can do today to make work easier for working parents, before then moving on to how we can set our businesses up for the future to attract and retain working parents. Please do send in your questions as we go. It'll be far more engaging if I can ask your questions to our panel. But to start us off, I'd like to pass to you, Sarah, and hear what you think the main challenges that working parents are facing at the moment.
So working parents are burnt out. Over half of parents are now reporting they're burnt out, and the main reason is they're just overstretched. At the moment, we're expected to look after children, we're expected to homeschool children, do our jobs, and all in lockdown. It's simply not possible, and that kind of pressure just leads to a constant feeling of failure. And I think it's I'm kind of laughing, but it's very, very real right now, and it's frightening, the impact it's having. And I have, from personal experience, so many friends who have, big jobs, very smart, under control, not stressed out normally women who are, really contemplating whether it really is even possible to be a working parent right now. And I find that daunting. McKinsey have reported 1 in 4 women are either downsizing or considering just leaving their careers. And those, these are statistics which are alarming and will have a really long-term impact. So these, conditions that we're experiencing today, and it is really stressful when you feel like you are failing your kids, your partner, your boss, are going to have very long-term implications. And I think that's why this conversation is so important, because there is now the opportunity to change things and address this big problem. Otherwise, we do look at kind of going backwards when it comes to gender equality in the workplace.
And I'm sure that everyone on the call is either in that boat or knows multiple people who are also in that boat. And to avoid depressing everyone on the call and us all talking about how tough it is right now, and focusing too much there, I'd love to just throw open to the full panel. What have you seen companies do really well during this period to make lives easier for working parents? How can we support our teams?
I've seen some great examples from some of the big organisations. So Tesco's, for example, have sent home anybody who's in their 3rd trimester of pregnancy, keeping people safe, doing the right thing for employees. Zurich have given 15 free days parental leave to those that need to take it to support. It's things like that. It's examples, I think, of big organisations making those steps and doing the right thing by their people, where they're genuinely thinking about their well-being, about their safety, about their stress levels, and trying to avoid some of the burnout that Sarah's mentioned, so that they don't then see this huge fallout over the next 6 months to a year of parents, I think, leaving their businesses.
Mm-hmm. And those big companies, fantastic examples. Are there any things that you think, if you were running a smaller organization today, or maybe if you're a HR leader on this call who hasn't yet put in place much beyond, hey, we're here to help, where would you start?
So I know we obviously work with a lot of small businesses. That's kind of our day-to-day contact that we have. And I know some fantastic organisations who have always worked like this. So one particular company we work with, he has 15 people working for him. He's never met any of them face to face. So these are people that physically cannot leave their homes, and they have some fantastic things in place around complete diary flexibility. So I don't care when you start and when you finish your work day. Here are your objectives. Here are the things that I need you to achieve. You go off and achieve them. And actually we do that as well. So I work with, I have 5 people now that I work with. 4 of them I've never met. We've only ever talked like this. And I'm not interested when they work. You do what you need to do by your family. These are the things I need you to achieve. And if you can't achieve them, let's have a conversation about that. I think for the companies that are able to, more support around the sort of tangible aspects of it. So where are they working? How are they working? What tools do they have available? How are they keeping in contact with their team? What does their workspace look like? So we all know that lots of people suffer physically from sitting in, wrong positions and, you know, not having monitors at the right height, chairs and desks and that type of thing. How can you support people physically from that perspective so they have a good workspace that's genuinely focused on them? But the biggest things that make the biggest difference are that understanding, that acknowledgement and that recognition of life outside work, and being able to say to somebody, here's your job, this is what I need you to do. If you can't do it, you tell me, but otherwise you're free to undertake that work in the way that suits you and the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've had oh, sorry, Sarah.
We're just going to add to that. I think that Jess, you put it brilliantly. You kind of need an amnesty on working parents right now. Everyone's doing their best. Like, you will not be judged on this time. Like, it's kind of what I want bosses to be saying to their working parents right now. Like, because that is the fear, that this time will be, reflected in their whole career progression. We are out of control right now, and working parents need that just reassurance. And it's a cultural thing, like you say, Jess. So I think that's a really important point you made.
I think, just Rob, I can touch on one point. Jess, you raised a really good point around objectives being met versus putting in the 9 till 6. My wife and I have a 4-year-old daughter who has been off nursery because they chose to close despite guidelines being they could open, which is, it happens. We've had great flexibility where we, at the start of the week, both say to our respective employers, this week I'm on childcare this time, my husband's on childcare this time, and both my employer and my wife's employer have given us that complete flexibility around kind of, you work when you need to, and you know the objectives, and shout for help if you need it. And touching on the workspace question, that's a really good one. So something we did at Instant Impact, but something my wife's company also did, was gave all employees a work from home budget to go and buy equipment, an office chair, a desk, an extra computer screen, whatever they needed. And I'd encourage all companies to think about that, and that they may not have the same desktop setup they have in the office, and allocate some funds towards allowing parents to set up at home like they are at work, so it is more comfortable, definitely.
And we've had a really good question from Lewis, so flipping it over slightly. So we all hope that we've got employers who are pushing flexibility and are understanding that working the 9 till 6 or whatever the hours are isn't necessarily feasible right now for everyone working. But if you aren't that lucky, and you've got a boss who doesn't have kids and maybe doesn't quite get how challenging this is, how would you go about explaining the struggles that you're facing to them, and what would you be asking of your employer to give you, to support you?
I think that's really...
Sorry, you go first.
No, I just think it's really interesting, because I think one positive aspect that's come out of remote working and working on Zoom so much of the time is that we now see into each other's homes. And I really hope that really offers up an opportunity to be far more empathetic. Like, I now know, the ages of everyone's kids, because I see them in the background of their calls, and I know the noises that they make when they're cross, because I hear them on the background of calls. And actually, I think that's a real positive that will come out of this. And it's not just kids; it's people with pets or people who live with their parents, and just really understanding, the whole person. And I really hope that will drive more empathy in the workplace. And I'm sorry to hear that not all bosses are like that. And it's obviously very understandable. And it's difficult to imagine what it's like to be homeschooling right now. But it is a whole job in its own right, being a teacher to your children. It's also the whole job as a right, being a carer, and someone has to make them lunches and snacks every 2 hours as well. So I would try and explain that, and I find it very difficult that some people can't understand that right now, because it's so challenging, and if they can't see it when it's just right in their faces, I don't know what else you can do. And I think this is this positive angle that's coming out. This is something we're experiencing as a business, because suddenly a lot of people are realizing their team members have got kids, and that's they're news to them. Most HR departments don't track how many working parents they have in their organization. And suddenly they've realized the importance of childcare, because it's really hard to have a conversation when you've got someone watching Peppa Pig under the desk. And I do it a lot, so I know, but it's still really hard. And so investing in childcare and just a few hours a week or a few hours a month gives parents space to focus. Because I think that's the other really important point that the questioner makes. It's like, I want to be able to do my job. This isn't like, I'm desperate to be able to focus and do my job. I love my job, as most working parents do. I don't want to be a teacher. Thank you very much. They're brilliant at their jobs too, but that's not what I want to do. So, if you can give them some space and flexibility, and childcare is a great way of doing that, then that is an utter gift.
So have you seen a big uplift in the number of companies of all sizes who are actually saying, you know what, we can't just leave this to the parents themselves to sort out childcare? And what have the approaches been there? Are companies looking to centralise childcare or give budget, or how's that working?
It's been very, very interesting because yes, we've seen a huge uplift, and that's because of the culture of seeing childcare in your face. Childcare has been invisible to employers for a long time, and that has been a real problem, and it causes so much stress for parents. Yet it's totally invisible, and it essentially is like a massive part of our infrastructure. It's what keeps businesses going. Yet we don't talk about it. It's massively undervalued. There's a whole another rant of mine, but that has shifted, and businesses are saying, right, we have to invest in childcare because it's obvious ROI. Particularly, for people being billed by an hour, £10 worth, an hour of childcare is nothing compared to an hourly rate of £100 or more. So we are seeing a lot of companies, particularly ones like consultants who do bill by the hour, but all sorts of businesses, and a lot of kind of businesses who maybe haven't thought about working parents before. So the startup community, particularly often run by people who aren't parents yet potentially, and suddenly they're like, oh, this is really a thing. And childcare is basically what enables a lot of my workforce to do their job. So yeah, investing in it is a no-brainer.
Yeah, and I mean, another big thing that you hear constantly with childcare, and I'm sure all parents on the call have had the debate of, well, it's expensive. It costs a lot of money when you're paying it out of your net salary rather than out of your gross salary as well. Are you seeing any innovative solutions where perhaps a company can't afford to, like a big consultancy, say, well, you know what, the ROI is there and we've got pockets that are very deep, we can pay for childcare for our employees and frankly go at it? Have you seen any innovative solutions where maybe the company hasn't got quite such deep pockets, they wish they could do that, but they can't go the whole hog, and there's maybe a halfway house?
We're not expecting, covering full days of childcare, just a few hours. It's £10 an hour is the average rate of childcare. So it's really not unreachable for most businesses. And I think the important thing is the type of childcare. It has to be flexible. And flexible is a word we hear a huge amount. Childcare traditionally is not flexible. It's rigid. It's the hours your nursery does. It's the after school club hours. And it's not reasonable for working parents to have to live their work life and live their whole schedule by what the local nursery dictates. So flexible in-home childcare is really the answer here.
Yeah. And so Ben and Jess, you both mentioned managing people and managing teams alongside kids at home, and both the people that you're managing often and the kids don't quite understand that you can't be there the whole time. So you've got a competing requirement there. How do you balance the need for now with management and looking after kids?
I'll go. I'll go first. I think I heard all of it. You broke up a little bit there, Rob, but I think I got the gist of the question. One of the things that I quickly adapted to was that trying to conduct a meeting whilst trying to quieten down a 4-year-old is impossible. So just embrace it. And I work with Rob, and Rob knows my daughter very well now, as do the rest of our business, because sometimes you've just got to let them, they just want to sit there and listen. And so I think one of the balancing mechanisms that we've had is just embrace my daughter Lenka being at my meetings, like internal meetings. And and forward fronting it with clients in that I have a child at home. She may come in, and almost every client I speak to is like, oh, great, if she comes in, would love to meet her. That'll be awesome. So we're definitely seeing that flexibility. With regards to managing the team, I've had to be much more agile, and so have they. And they've done a very good job of best place to call me now is my mobile rather than emailing me or using our instant messaging service. But also, can they be flexible with a little bit around me and make themselves available at times where perhaps my wife's on duty and then I'm free, but doesn't necessarily, it's in their lunch break, and not asking them to work extra hours, but just be flexible around my needs. And I've been quite lucky where the team have all been really accommodating around me. Don't know if that answers your question or not, Rob.
Yeah, you're great. And Jess, anything that you'd add on that one?
Yeah, I think so. I say fortunate. It's not fortunate. It's by design, and I get a bit on my high horse when people say, "Oh, you're so lucky that your husband shares childcare with you." It's not lucky. The way we set up our lives is that we would take a joint responsibility in looking after our children, in picking them up from places, dropping them off. And I think something that's been really interesting for me is that naturally, I don't want to fall to stereotypes, but in a lot of cases, the childcare has fallen to the mum, who's then trying to fit in a job and homeschool and all those other things that we've talked about. And for me, I find myself challenging people to say, have you had that conversation with your partner? You know, have you actually said, you take a step back, you know, you need to take a step back too, you need to take a share in the responsibility. And I think there is a real onus on people, you know, particularly in those relationships and those home setups where that conversation hasn't taken place, to say, no, you know what, now's the time where we have the conversation and we actually share the workload here. In terms of managing teams, I think it's then a case of respecting it. So my husband and I realised very early on in the first lockdown, we were doing full days, and one of us was hitting the gym harder than the other one at the end of the day, let's put it that way. So we quickly realised that full days probably weren't going to work, so let's split them down the middle. So we're quite lucky that one of us will do mornings, one of us will do afternoons, and we'll switch. But it means that we can plan calls in. So a lot of my work obviously takes place in situations like this, and I need to know that I can have those calls and that I'm not constantly going to be interrupted. Yeah, exactly the same happens. They do wander in from time to time, but being able to have that time to dedicate it. Now I then work with my team to say, right, when have you got your little one at nursery, when have you got this, when have you got this, and we've planned our weekly meetings around that. And if somebody can't be there, you know, they can't be there, it happens. We're much more accepting of it. But I think being a good manager is one of the things that particularly that organizations really need to get on board with. So there's a real thing here about it's all very well us at the top saying this is how we want it to work and this is all the things that we're doing, but are all of the management levels, at all levels of your organization, embracing that and acting accordingly? And I think something certainly for HR people to think about is this way of working, I don't think is going to go away. So how do you equip your managers and how do you bring them the skills that they need to make sure they can effectively manage people who are working from home, working for different hours, whatever that may be. But I think there's a real call here for people to have a think about this and how they make it work.
Great. Well, last couple of questions then on what we can do today in this current world before we hopefully, fingers crossed, get to something slightly different from a COVID perspective looking forward and start thinking about the measures that we need to put in place in that time period. So guys, please do keep sending in questions that we can put to the panel. One more from me. I think, have any of you seen any measures that, hey, sound like a good idea, but actually haven't worked that well? They feel like they're well intentioned, but really don't quite get to the crux of the issue here.
I know that some of the organisations that we speak to are very reluctant to put in measures just for working parents, as if the rest of the organisation might feel put out that working parents are being treated in a special way. And I find that kind of frustrating because right now working parents, you know, we're about levelling the playing field here, and working parents do need to be treated in a special way because they do have particular demands, and particularly, you know, I'm talking about, you know, right now. So I think sometimes that can be, you know, it's well-meaning, but it can be a little bit misguided. And actually, you know, supporting working parents right now is a really important thing to do. Otherwise, you will lose talent. The other thing that's sometimes put in place, and there's loads of really well-meaning things that kind of like mental health tools or check-ins, and right now it can be hard, and it's for the reasons we just talked about, scheduling things at the moment. That means I have to work out, is there going to be a gap in my daughter's Zoom lessons? Is my husband going to then be able to pick up at that day and swap me? All those sorts of logistics. Suddenly my head's exploding a bit. So it's just about being respectful and conscious of people's, working parents' timetables right now are, very difficult to manage.
Yeah.
I've also seen lots, so I've heard from some organisations, perhaps those with fewer working parents, of doing lots of check-in in the morning and check-in at the end of the day. I, as a working parent, would find that an absolute nightmare because I don't get anything done between 9 and 4. I get most of my things done pre-9 o'clock and post 7 o'clock because that's when my work time's available. So there are things like that, again, quite well meaning, let's touch base, let's talk to the rest of the team, but actually really not terribly helpful when you think about when people might actually be working.
Just had a great comment through from someone who's saying that they've introduced fortnightly pulse surveys specifically to get a sense of how is this working. It's new for all of us. Have you seen any other good ways of getting a sense from your employees and feedback from the team of what is and isn't working? I've
spoken to a business quite recently, quite a big business, who have created a kind of working parent community group, a virtual group. I think it might be just a Slack channel actually, and which is a way of kind of sharing tips, and kind of taking the temperature of that group. And it's not an onerous thing, like you don't have to be part of it, but it has been quite helpful. And they've reported that it's been been well received. It's had quite a lot of engagement, and it's a good way of checking in on specific needs for working parents.
Just had a challenging question in here from Alex. I'm going to put you all on the spot, if you don't mind, and hopefully you don't regret signing up for joining the panel. So Alex has said, as a business, they're really keen to help in any way to support parents, and have offered as much as they think they can offer. So he's keen to understand whether there are any other interventions they might not have thought of already. The more variety, the better. So I wanted to put it to each of you to throw out a suggestion that Alex and that business might not have thought of before. I'll leave it for you all to jump in. Whoever goes first probably has the easiest task.
The best thing that I heard was something really, really straightforward, which was a message from the CEO out to every single member of the team saying it's okay for you not to be performing on every single level at the moment. It's okay for you not to be around between 9 and 5 every single day to answer the phone. It's okay for your child to wander into a meeting. Just this, again, it's that real sort of role modeling piece at the very top level of the organisation that gives us as working parents that feeling of relief that there isn't the same burden of expectation for me to keep up the same presence, performance, and everything else that I'm normally expected to do when I'm in the office. Somebody saying, it's okay, I get it, I'm doing it, I'm in the same situation. That for me, I think, has been consistently what I've heard to be the most, bring about the biggest feeling of relief in working parents.
Well, I would say high bar there to follow on from that, Ben and Sarah.
Well, mine was fairly similar, Jess, so thank you very much for going first. I think my wife got a thank you care package from her employer a couple of weeks ago, which was like just an acknowledgement. She gets she gets the thanks for doing her job, obviously, for giving childcare. But I think acknowledging, like you said, the kind of permission to play, almost permission to be a parent, that's super important. But then a thank you at the end of a project, the end of a month. My wife deals a lot with payroll and kind of accounts, kind of getting it all sorted end of the month end, she calls it. So consolidation. So I think a thank you when you know someone's is working pre 9 o'clock and post 7 o'clock, like you do, Jess, and just like, because that's not the norm. It certainly shouldn't be expected. So I think a thank you.
Yeah, definitely don't want payroll to be disillusioned. That's not going to work out well for
not for anybody, right?
Yeah.
No.
Sarah, I think leave final word to you then on the now and today. What we can be doing right now to help working parents.
And I'm going to say childcare, but I've already said that, and I will stress again how important it is to give parents a break. It's the only real thing that can actually give them space to just, even if they just sit in their bedroom by themselves for an hour, like that is a mental health boost that most parents do not get right now. But I think, Ben and Jess have made some really lovely points, and I think it is that the sort of amnesty amongst working parents that I mentioned before as well is really important. Working parents are feeling very, very judged right now. So just take the pressure off.
Great. Well, Alex, hope there was at least
one more.
One more. Great. A bonus.
So when my daughter was born, like we all have children, sort of and it was a pre-COVID world. So I had 2 weeks paternity. You go back to work. My wife was on maternity leave and at home and just sort of trying to run the house at the same time as do all the childcare. Not completely different to how things can be for some households. One of the best gifts that we got was some ready meals from a company called Cook, that you could literally just not have to worry about preparing dinners or lunches and just whack it in the oven and 30 minutes and you've got a healthy, well-made dinner or lunch. I think any working parent right now would probably bite your hand off for something like that, with not having to worry about the meal prep and the cooking, and any little wins like that, I think would be really useful and appreciated.
I would send a washing basket full of snacks as well, like yo-yos and oaty bars and all that type of thing that working parents just deposit on the side.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, conscious of time, so I suggest we move on to our second big question, which is essentially how we can set up our businesses for the future to attract, retain, and get the full value out of what is a fantastically talented group of people, working parents. So Jess, start with you here. I mean, how big do you really think the opportunity is here for companies that can get the setup right to be an employer of choice for working parents?
So this for me is your moment. This is where you make the decision about what kind of employer you want to be. Do you want to be the kind of employer that genuinely respects, values, cares about, takes a deeper interest in the people that are working for you? That in turn will undoubtedly have a positive impact on your diversity, your performance, your financials, your culture. Do you want to be that guy, or do you want to be the company that sat there waiting for things to go back to normal and to get everybody back into the office and for life to revert to as was? Personally, I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think people have had a taste of what it's like to have a bit more control over their time. Homeschool exceptions aside, being able to completely work from home, it's not for most people. I quite often hear people saying, I'd love to do two or 3 days in the office would be my absolute ideal, because people still crave that social interaction. But here is the time where you get to speak to your people, you find out what's worked, you find out what hasn't worked, you find out what they want, you work out what you want, you work out the value to you and where there are economic efficiencies to be had. You get to redefine your culture and you bring it back together, and that's the type of organisation you emerge from this situation as. So for me, it's the biggest moment that I think we'll ever see. I think it's another working revolution. It's probably the best term that I've heard used for this situation. You mentioned at the beginning about this opening up talent pools that weren't there before. We know, particularly in large corporate businesses, they absolutely hemorrhage talent. And I know, 95% of my audience are women and 89% of them are mothers. I know how many of them have fallen out of the workplace because companies just haven't been able to get their heads around this. But being forced into a position where they've had to deal with remote working, and let's be very clear about the terminology here, this has been remote working, this hasn't necessarily been flexible working. Now actually being able to take that really good blend of all of the different types of flexible working, whether it's start and finish times, whether it's part-time hours, whether it's the location of where I work, being able to mix all of that into the pot and find out what works is absolutely critical. And I think there will be a real performance differential here between companies that get it right and companies that don't.
Right. So assuming that everyone on this call wants to get this right and wants to be that employer of choice, can you guys just run me through the vision of where you see the future beyond COVID? And Jess, you've already touched upon a hybrid working environment where you can spend time in the office, you can work remotely. What are going to be the things that stand your company or anyone listening's company out from everyone else who's also doing similar things?
So for me, again, it comes back to these what are the tools that you have at your disposal? So what are the things that I can make work? So if we look back at everything that the last year has taught us, it should have taught us how to operate as teams who are disparate and in different locations. We should have been able to keep up some element of training. We should know how to make things work and keep things over. We should know when it's really important that we do see each other. So when actually do we need to get together and do we need to sit face to face, and how are we now going to weave that into our working way? Is it going to be that as a business I say, okay, cool, I now feel well equipped enough to move to this objective based performance measurement, as opposed to how long am I sat in the office staring at somebody? Am I, doing a face-to-face one-to-one with them all the time? Or actually, am I now able to say, here are your objectives, you work when you need to? That will feel too out of reach for some people. But I think definitely this kind of transition towards focusing on output rather than focusing at time at desk should be just an absolute number one. And then you start to think about where they need to be. So again, I think socially, and we have a real opportunity to move things away from everything being concentrated in London, Manchester and Birmingham, wherever it may be. People can now be in other places, which opens up your resource pool to the point where you can actually pick the skills you need from the people that you want, which again, it keeps coming back to this. It then makes us a much more diverse, much higher performing workforce. And I know that's probably this is exactly how we would want it to be, but I don't think that's out of reach for businesses. I really don't.
Yeah, and even we ran a webinar last week on the opportunity that presents from a global mobility perspective as well as across the UK. Sarah, I could see you wanted to jump in on this.
No, I think there's a real opportunity. I mean, Jess has been incredibly articulate around flexible working and the ways that we're changing, and I absolutely agree with everything she said. I think that something always really alarms me is the transition of becoming a parent. Like, it's such a big change, and I don't really think employers have ever really addressed this properly. Like, it's the biggest life-changing thing that most people will go through. And maternity leave has still not been given the sort of the innovation that it requires and the support that it's required. And it's a big topic. But if you think that about 1 in 5 women drop out of the workforce within 5 years of having their first baby, if you think that for every baby that a mother has, their salary goes down 5%. These are statistics that shouldn't exist in this day and age. So I think there's a lot of interesting things to be done around maternity coaching, mentoring for women on maternity leave, enabling to use kit days by providing childcare, and really supporting that transitional time. And this is for mums and dads, but it is inevitably mums who go through the biggest life change at that stage. And there is it's science. There is an identity change and identity crisis for some women that does question, make women question their role in their careers. And this is a real opportunity for businesses to be empathetic, to be supportive, and just be there for working mothers and enable them to come back into the workforce and not lose them in that critical 2 years, 5 years after having babies.
I think also, just on that quickly, it'd be interesting, people coming back off furlough, I think it's a similar thing. So if you've had someone out on furlough for the last 3 to 6 months, what's changed? What's happened? How do you bring them back into the business? How do you bring them back into the culture? I think this transitioning back into the business piece, exactly like Sarah said, it's just not been nailed by many organisations. I don't see it done very well very often.
No,
yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, it's not just maternity leave, absolutely.
I think as well, Rob, one of the points of your question was what's going to make company A stand out from company B in a post-COVID world. I think it's about the manager's attitude towards flexible and remote working, because there'll be some managers that will be forced into it by company policy who just simply don't like it and manage in a way which almost feels like they're even calling you every hour or check-ins every so often. And I think how a manager responds and articulates how they manage remotely and on their attitude towards those components from a talent perspective will be whether or not you are able to keep, attract and retain the top talent.
Sarah, something that you mentioned earlier stuck with me, that not everyone's the same, and it is okay to treat working parents differently from other members of the team. As you scan forward now to the future and flexible working and everything that we've been discussing already, are there any elements where you think working parents need to be treated actively differently from a flexibility stance point in comparison to the rest of the team?
It's really interesting because it kind of comes back to something we talked about earlier about, and there's a phrase called secret parenting, which is coined by an American economist called Emily Oster. And she talks about, for a very long time, parenting in secret has been the way to do it when you're in the workplace. And it's kind of a funny phrase, but it's true. I mean, I remember coming back from my first maternity leave and no one asked to see a picture of my baby. That was the baby I'd spent every day with and not left more than an hour until that day. And I was like, oh, so this is how it works now. And I didn't put a picture on my desk. And I was in an agency at the time, an ad agency, and I no one else was a working mum, and it wasn't the thing to be. So I tried not to talk about it a lot. And that puts a hell of a lot of pressure on working parents, and we've got to normalize it, and we've got to normalize the challenges that come with it too, and understand that sometimes if you're a working parent, you are going to be called away because your kid's been sent home from school, and it's going to happen. So of course, equality isn't about treating everyone the same. It's about respecting different circumstances that people live in, and being flexible to that. And I just noticed Alex put in the chat, it is about flexibility and treating people, because it's not just parents who are carers as well, it's people with elderly parents, it's people with pets, all these things are about bringing their whole self to work, and that is what will give employee well-being, and that's obviously a huge driver of retention and productivity amongst your team.
Couldn't agree more. We did consider starting this webinar with us all just showing photos of our kids, but thought we might lose engagement quite quickly. That's why we didn't do that. Two themes that have come up for me. I think you mentioned, Sarah, the maternity and paternity innovation. It's been the same for God knows how many years. Paint a better future for us. What do you think should be happening with maternity and paternity? And before you answer that, just a quick plug for everyone. Please keep providing questions for us.
You might have seen me sigh there, because paternity leave is one of those things that the change hasn't happened yet, but I believe it is beginning to happen. So I haven't looked at the figures lately, but it was about 1% of fathers were taking up the extended paternity leave that's on offer. But I really do believe that will change. That is a big shift, and these things do take time. Now, of course, it's such a critical time when you become parents, and getting equality early on, and new dads taking more time out is a really important way of getting that equality that Jess was talking about in her relationship, sharing those responsibilities. But there are other things that out there at the moment. There are some interesting platforms that could help women on the maternity journey, whether that's medically or emotionally. Lots and mental health amongst new mums is such a key problem, and more there are these kind of mental health platforms who are delivering really good services to mums and giving them confidence. And that confidence might be to say, I don't want to work again, and that's fine too, but confidence to make sure they are able to make those decisions, say, actually, no, my work is really important to me. I want to be able to be, I want to be a worker and a mother, and that's okay. So yeah, I think there's more stuff coming on stream, and I think that things will change. It just does take a bit of time.
And we've touched upon this topic of, I guess, reboarding, so people coming back post paternity leave and coming back into the business. Jess, are there any suggestions you've got for companies as they're looking to revamp that reboarding process and make parenting world?
The first one for me is around this kind of concept of keep in touch days, which are great if you want to keep in touch with work whilst you're trying to deal with a child that screams a lot and doesn't sleep. For some people that doesn't work. I think, again, kind of rather than this expectation of somebody sort of whether it's checking in once a month, or I remember when I had my first maternity leave, I said to my boss, oh yeah, well, I'll call you once a month at this time, which he stuck to, and I just felt, because I'd already agreed to it, that I couldn't possibly turn back to him and say I can't think about it. So it just became this huge, great big stress for me that I was going to be talking to him and I had nothing to talk about other than the baby. So I think there's I suppose there's a lesson in there about what people agree to before they have children and what they're capable of doing afterwards. Keep in touch days, like I said, how are they used effectively and what do you do with them? So I think lots of places leave it very much to the local line manager, which might be right, but actually if you've missed out, if people take a whole year out of their business and they've missed company updates, they've missed lots of press and things that have happened, they've missed strategic announcements about changes in direction of the business, and then they've missed loads of tiny things about new clients that have been taken on board, new tools, new ways of doing things. I think really, and I haven't got the answer on how to do this, but I think taking stock of everything that's happened in that year and finding a way to better deliver that to people from the very top down to the bottom, so the minute detail versus the grand scale of things, I think it's tough to do, but I think that's the way people need to be brought back in. The coaching thing, absolutely massive. Sarah mentioned when I went back into work, I had the biggest confidence crisis. I was on an all-male board. I was sat at that table and I could barely bring myself to speak. I kept thinking, or if I say something that, a discussion that's already happened 3 months ago and I've missed it, I'm going to look like a complete idiot. I didn't know who I was anymore. I felt uncomfortable in my body. There were so many different factors at play, and yet I was expected to step back into this role where I had 600 people working for me. I knew what was going on. I was on top of all the projects, and I just couldn't deal with it. And actually, it was probably the beginning of that decision to leave, but it could quite easily have been handled in a very different way with some buddying. I don't always like the term, but actually having somebody else at my level on my team, as well as my direct line manager and the people within my team to help bring me kind of back into the fold. And then some coaching on top of that about getting my confidence back, feeling better about myself, getting to know myself again. Exactly the same. I was a completely different person. In many ways, I was a much better people manager because I had this new level of empathy, but I didn't know that, and it took me quite a bit of time to learn that about myself. So again, it's just it's a must do better on all fronts.
I can't speak from personal experience because I've not been on maternity leave, but I know that my wife works for an international charity, and I know that when she went back after a year off, so she took the full 12 months, that the maternity cover that they had in place for her being off, they kept on for an extra month when my wife went back to work. So they were able to do a very soft, long, detailed handover, which gave my wife the chance to sort of meet with executives, her team, peers, managers, directors, and really spend that month before she was expected to do any work. In effect, she went in full time, but wasn't expected to do any work, just catch up. And if you have the infrastructure and the budgets where you can afford to do something like that, I know that she really benefited from that soft return to work.
We're coming into the last 5-10 minutes, so last request for questions. We just had a few really good ones in. We've also had a request from Jane that we send round a list of resources with the recording afterwards. We'll absolutely do that. We'll also send round Sarah and Jess's details. If you want to find out more about Bubble or that works for me, then you'll absolutely be able to do that afterwards. So no need to worry on that front. Couple of questions in there. So from Tripti, as a manager, you get asked questions by non-parents to almost imply that they're getting penalised for not being a parent, including questions like, can I have the same flexibility for my pet as they're like a child? to me. So hear the point about not treating everyone the same, but how do you balance those conversations to make sure that it doesn't feel like favoritism or certain people are getting concessions? I think, Sarah, that was a point originating from you, so I might pass over to you on that one.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I may have sounded flippant about it earlier, and I certainly didn't mean to, because it is a challenging conversation to have with your workforce, and making sure everyone feels like they've been treated fairly is absolutely paramount. But there are different considerations for different people who in your workforce, and I think you just have to break it down to that. And in a way, I mean, my background's working in ad agencies, and there was lots of team building stuff and beers and stuff that I couldn't access as a working parent, that a lot of my younger colleagues thought was great, and there was a lot of investment in that, nothing investment in that. And in a way, there are things that are always going to be investments that we make as employers, which not everyone is going to enjoy. And I know it is challenging, and I hear particularly around pets at the moment, which is I think something that a lot of people are taking a lot of solace from having, and loneliness is such a big issue. Pets can provide such great companionship, that you have to be sensitive to this, and it is difficult. But I would say for working parents, it's going to be about productivity and ROI, and if you give parents that investment in childcare, they will deliver results for you. And we're talking about productivity, we're talking about mental health, and we're talking about acquisition and retention of talent, and that's should be enough to make you feel confident in the choices that investing in working parents.
Bob, on this one in particular, I think if it comes back to this cultural piece around flexible working. So if you as a business are able to nail flexible working, all the tools that you have at your disposal, you've got a culture that supports it from the very top to the very bottom, and everybody's bought into it. It shouldn't actually matter whether you're a working parent or you're doing it because you take your 80-year-old mother to go and collect her pension once a week, or whatever else it may be. This should be about, if that toolkit is there and it's working effectively, then it can be available to everybody. It just goes back to some of these things that we talked about around that culture of support, having the right tools in place, having the objective-based performance rather than that issue of presenteeism. It shouldn't matter if it's done effectively in the long term, whether you're a working parent or whether you're somebody who practices yoga in your spare time and you want to be off on Tuesday afternoons to go and run classes. Yeah.
And Ben, I think we've got a last question in for you, which has been engaging the team in whatever setup you create moving forward is clearly crucial, because they're a big part of why you're putting all of these measures in place in the first place. How can we best engage our teams in defining what the future of work looks like for working parents and non-working parents?
Yeah, I think it involved them in the conversation. Like I think Sarah and Jess both mentioned that every individual has their own nuance and their own requirement for flexibility at work, or so you're never going to be able to, like Jess said, you want to build a system where everybody feels invested and that they've had a say, and that the business has taken on board lots of possible permutations, but you can't take on board all of them in the world because there are a lot of them, but that you build a flexibility framework that works for everybody. And I think we've achieved, not that brilliantly, we've done a good job of that, but just asking people what works, what doesn't work, and being very open with them that we are having to change as a business. We didn't expect to get to this point this quickly. We always knew as a business we wanted to move more towards flexibility and remote working and that, but we've all had to accelerate that very, very quickly by a number of years. And just being transparent, like, employees don't believe it anymore if you say you've got all the answers to every question and every problem. Just got to be honest. So I don't know how it's going to work, but just work with us while we figure it out. And I find that most of the time you'll get buy-in from employees on that basis.
Fantastic. Right, we've got two more questions, and then I'll close with one last question for all of you. So question for you, Jess. one of the themes that resonates with me from the way this from Alex is guilt, and parents feeling guilty about not working 9 to 5 and not being there for their child, and similar problems when returning from mat leave, for missing time with their children. Whichever way round, there can be guilt. Any ideas on how we can help people with that guilt?
So the biggest thing, speaking from personal experience, that helped me cope with guilt is the acknowledgement that I need to work. I need something else in my life that isn't my children, and that's okay. I have 2 young daughters, and I want them to see that I am a working mum who runs a business, who's able to achieve things, who is also, what I hope, a good mother to them. And I think that is totally okay. But you have to go through this a bit of self-reflection and accept that both of those things are okay for you to be. You don't have to be one or the other or at the expense of one another, but you're the only person who can relieve yourself of guilt. As managers, we've already said, you can help alleviate a parent's guilt by saying to them, I accept this, I accept that we're in a difficult time at the moment, and it's okay for you to not be the person that you might normally be under normal circumstances with all the childcare in place.
Great. We have 4 minutes left, and we promise never to run over. So Sarah, I'll give you a question here, but I'm looking for a succinct answer, if that's all right. So this is in from Joe, who's asked, do you have any advice for parents in client-facing roles for managing childcare during calls and meetings? It can be difficult to interact and keep attention at times. Have you got any tips?
That's the really hard question. I mean, if I
You're
knew the
welcome.
answer to that, I mean, Peppa Pig is essentially my answer to that question. I don't know if you're aware of it. I mean, it's hard, and I think Ben just put something really lovely about the kind of transparency, and actually I've found in some ways it's kind of helped build some relationships with clients, and you've got to judge that. And if they say you've got to say I may well be interrupted. If that's a problem, let's reschedule this, and then it gives them the option to do that. But yeah, otherwise Peppa Pig.
Great. Well, you guys have all been absolutely fantastic. I think some really brilliant insight throughout. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar on your end. I'll pass over to each of you for a 1 sentence max close. What do you, if we something you haven't covered already, what do we think we should be looking at for the future? 1 sentence max. Ben, why don't you kick us off?
For every company to have a board of directors where at least 50% are parents and working parents.
Great. Sarah or Jess, who wants to come in now? Closing statement, last final thought.
Please consider investing in childcare. It will deliver ROI. It will show you understand parents in the situation that are in, and it will drive productivity.
Brilliant. And Jess?
Don't miss out on this opportunity to become the employer that your employees need you to be. This is it. This is your moment.
Superb. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope everyone's enjoyed the webinar. Just want to finish by thanking you all for joining. Hopefully see you next time. We've got a couple of upcoming webinars, so one on 4 p.m. on Wednesday the 10th of March on the work-life imbalance, and then the 24th of March on building an inclusive early careers program. You can also find all of our resources on our website. We'll follow up with links to everyone who's been on this call, a summary of some of the topics, and a recording. And if you have any questions, please do get in touch. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Go back, spend some time with your kids, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime soon.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everyone.